All right, BJ McKay here. Once again, I'm trying to put together some talks that I give, some things that have been super impactful for clients that I've worked with. And today's installment, if you will, is one that's really close to my heart. It's called Selfawareness is the Ego's Antidote. And what this session is all about is regaining your locus of control in any role that you're in. And centering. This is honestly maybe one of the more hard-hitting sessions that I've put together. Why that is because you're going to find a lot of themes here that respond to personal accountability and about taking ownership of what's happening in an environment that you're in, and then understanding how to separate yourself from the stories and the narratives going on outside of your world, outside of your sphere of control. And the last few times that I give this, it's very rarely is there a round of applause. So I hope this is impactful, and hopefully as you're working through this, if you have your predictive index pattern with you, which is a behavioral assessment I use in this session, go ahead and have that out. And you might want a piece of notepaper because there'll be times for practical pauses for you to think through how what I might have shared in terms of some insight impacts you in your world. So without further ado, I want you to think about this next slide that comes up. It's probably the source of most of the problems that we run into when we're dealing with other people in our environments. All right, it's a quick statement. We oftentimes think this either consciously or subconsciously that we're not enough. Oftentimes this makes us feel marginalized, like what I'm bringing to the table, who I'm bringing to the table isn't enough to get the needs met of a role, a job, a project, for a customer, for a client, for my spouse, for my kids. There's this theme that comes up that says you're not enough, you're not enough, you're not enough. And where I found this comes from is the ego. And this has become very popular through book by Ryan Holiday, which has been very impactful to me, called Ego is the Enemy. And I believe he is right. The ego is the one that spins these stories that says who you are isn't good enough. It's not enough for these relationships. You need to be more. And if you're thinking to yourself now, well, you know, that doesn't land well on me. Or if you're thinking, yeah, that's good, I need that. I guess you could be right on both sides. All right. So there is a certain level of resolve that we need, some confidence to move forward to that I talk about in just a little bit. But there's also the kind of nefarious side of ego, which at this stage in human evolution is most of it. All right. And it tells us this story. You are the center of the universe. Everyone's revolving around you. All the things happening around you are about you. It's a narrative about what's happening to you. So if you think about that if you're an avid social media user, I mean, this place, the ego runs rampant, right? You're there controlling this experience. You're thinking about it from a standpoint of what does this inform me about me when you're doing it, whether you know it or not. But take it back to work. Think about some of the interactions you've had with other people that have been less than optimal, where you felt disrespected, you felt marginalized, felt like you weren't being heard. Isn't the narrative that it's someone else's fault that you're not being heard, or that the environment that you're in just isn't conducive to your productivity? There's some of those words that come up. And again, could you be right? Sure. Are there a lot of people that are unaware, obtuse, that don't get it at jobs? Yes. So if your criteria is to only work at a place or around people that only get it, you are going to be on a long, long search. So if we can all agree that we're not the center of the universe, where do we move from there? I think we move here. Where does the ego live? All right. How do I go and find it so that I can do something with it? I can bring it up into my consciousness, into my awareness, so that I can navigate the world around me in a standpoint where my ego isn't driving my responses. It's not hijacking my amygdala and my brain and allowing me to do things that are just visceral and I'm out of character at times from what I would typically do, and make me less of a leader around the people that I'm with. So where the ego lives is usually in a deep, dark cave inside of you. And it's scary. We don't want to go in there. It's the thing of your nightmares. Because when you go down there, what your body and your mind is telling you is that something bad is about to happen to you. And if you want to go more deeper into what that cave looks like, some of the work of Jordan Peterson does a great job, much more articulate than I could ever do, showing you from a psychological standpoint what that makeup is. Nevertheless, when you going into that cave means you're going to be stripped of confidence. You're going to be stripped of all these things. And what's going to be promised to you is embarrassment. What's going to be promised to you is something's going to get taken from you. Or ultimately, in our minds and our bodies as human organisms, you're going to die. Or there's the threat of death in there. So if you think about an actual cave, if we bring that metaphor to life, that actual cave that's there, and I told you all those things would happen if you went in there, I think you'd be justified to avoid going into that cave, right? I mean, anybody that wants to go into that cave, are you crazy? Do you know what happens when you go there? However, when you actually go there, you confront the dragon. You confront the boogie monster, if you will, that's holding you back, that's spinning all these narratives about what the world is supposed to be, how people are supposed to treat you, that you're the center of the world and they can't be right because you feel these things, so they must be wrong. So once you see it, you're going to feel small. It'll feel scary. All your vulnerabilities come to life. So what does ego want to do? It wants to keep you away from the cave. It wants to protect you from your vulnerabilities. It wants to protect you from addressing some of those things that are where that's where the most growth for you from an education standpoint, a personal standpoint, a relationship standpoint, a development standpoint. They live in the vulnerabilities. Yet us as human beings do our best to avoid being vulnerable. Or we come up with like humble brag vulnerability. And if you want an example of that, just do 4 scrolls through your Instagram feed. I'm sure you'll see plenty of it. All right. So if ego is protecting me from my vulnerability and it thinks that's a good thing, that's why it's installed there over the epochs of human history. What can I, a person in this long narrative being wove over millions of years, do about it? Well, in this case, we're going to use predictive index as a guide, and I have an example up there, my pattern. All right. And if you don't understand PI at this, there's other links that I'll have in and around where this podcast or this YouTube clip's going to be that you can kind of get yourself a primer. But if you have the data, bring it out. Now, if you don't, just be thinking through which of these land most on you. So you don't have to stop now, but you want to think through it. And I'm going to stop in a few areas for you to take some notes in terms of how this hits. But if we want to go into the cave as it relates to PI and how I'm wired and what my needs and drives are that motivate me to choose behavior, which is what PI is measuring, we need to go into the center of that circle, which is self-awareness. All right, that's the kind of gateway, if you will, to address the ego. Self-awareness is 100% our responsibility as an individual. I can't blame anyone else for my self-awareness. That's the keyword, self. In self-awareness is where PI measures what's going on, how I'm responding to needs and drives, how I am responding to the world around me. If I have self-awareness, if I have a healthy level of self-awareness, I can then go to the next circle out, which is self-management. I can realize that I have things to learn, that maybe I don't know as much as I thought I did. Maybe there's some people that I can help. Maybe they're wired different than me. That's where I start self-managing. I manage behavior. There's things I won't say in certain environments. There's things I will say in other environments. But I'm starting to listen more to what's happening outside of me because I've already done the work on self-awareness. I've already went to the cave, if you will, where the ego lives. And I start managing myself. Now, some of those things, and we're going to talk about those more, cost me energy. There's certain behaviors I know as BJ sitting here as a person that I don't like. My body doesn't like to listen. I wish it did. I wish I naturally like to listen, but I like to problem solve, which means I want to tell you how to fix all your problems. Oftentimes, those lead to suboptimal relationships for me. And that's just one example. So I try to meter that self-manage. So when I'm listening, it's costing me energy, even though it is the right behavior for the time. And my ego is screaming, no, you're right. Tell them what you mean. That's not going to be optimal. And in doing those first two, self-awareness, I own it. Self-management, I own it. I pick my own behavior. Then I can go to the outer circles of engaging others, building relationships outside of myself. And then ultimately, if you want to think globally to the world, then I can achieve results, be it business, if you're listening to this in a work context, family, if you're listening to this as a husband or wife, and you're in a household of some sort with a partner, achieving a result there, or in the world, achieving a result externally in the world. It's going to lead out that far. So let's take our PI patterns out and let's do a little bit of a deep dive. And just to warn you, I'm going to stick on the high sides predominantly of the drive. So anything to the right of the midpoint is where I'm going to drive a lot of today's conversation. So if we're thinking about the A drive, we have a drive that speaks of dominance. So let's think about the tension point between dominance and vulnerability. If my A drive is high, which means it's to the right of that midpoint that you see up here, that caret, what does that mean? It means I get my self-confidence internally. If I get my self-confidence internally, if you think about confidence, that is the currency of productivity. That was a quote by our chairman at Advisa, Bob Wilson. Self-confidence is the currency of productivity. If I'm looking at this, I want to be productive with myself, in my relationships, with my work. That's why self-confidence has such a premium in what I'm going to talk about in terms of managing the ego. So if I have internal self-confidence, whose validation do I need? Mine. Whose way do I want to do things? Mine. And then if you see in the bottom right there, what are my needs? When I'm in the environment, what's that driving me to need? Independence, control, and then challenges that are worthy of me. So if you think about how that person would operate that is a high A, we're going out telling, fixing the world. Everything is a thing, tangible problem to be solved. So let me throw in the word vulnerability and now high A that wants independence, control, challenges. They almost seem like they're antonyms, right? So how does the A drive protect you from vulnerability? Well, it makes you think that you're right and your solutions to everything have to be the right way. So you're going to give everybody the gift of all of your ideas first, and then they get to attack your ideas, and then you're going to come up with the best idea. Vulnerability would take you in the opposite direction, or on the low A side from behavior. If I'm a high A, I might want to be modeling or thinking about some of my lower A colleagues or people in my life, people that are wired for impact on a team, for harmony, including others, starting with collaboration, which means what? I'm going to talk less. I might ask a good question, and I might listen and let multiple people respond before I talk again. I might start to reconsider what my ultimate goal is. And for a high A, remember, one of that ultimate goals is usefulness. I want to be useful to the people around. And your body is speeding, your ego is like, how am I going to be useful? How am I going to win here? It's turning that off for a period of time strategically to better engage the room, better engage the people that are around me. So I'm not going to lie. If you're a high A, vulnerability is probably one of those things that lives deep in that cave. And that means that I'm freely giving away independence and control. I'm giving away my challenges to other people in a meeting, in a conversation. If we think by nature a really high A or someone who is a very high A is going to do that, we're blind. It's going to take work. The good news is you can do it. And again, when you're doing it right at first, remember that it's not going to feel good. And your ego is not going to like that very much. No, this can't be right. This doesn't feel good. This can't be right. This other person's idea is different than mine. All right? So if you're at high A, hopefully you took a few notes on that. Remember that those needs for independence, control, and challenges that are worthy of you are always going to be there. The key is being aware. Again, self-awareness breeds self-management. How am I going to better manage that at times and build that skill? The next drive is the B drive, and this is a drive for extroversion traditionally, but if you want to think about it in terms of self-confidence again, it's external self-confidence, which means I get my self-confidence from other people, all right? So we'll focus on that tension point with extroversion and vulnerability. On its surface, somebody who has a higher B drive who needs social acceptance, social validation, and social connection, you would think, vulnerability must be easier for those people. And in some ways it is. If I'm high B, I talk to think. I'm more than willing to put my ideas, my feelings, myself out there because I naturally trust early in a relationship because I want to be trusted, right? So when I'm out there, I'm talking, I'm sharing, but on the underbelly of a high B is I'm typically projecting an image of myself that I want to be perceived as. That's where I might be pitching myself as a little bit different than I really am or how I really feel, because what do I really want? I want the social acceptance, validation, and connection. It's not necessarily being who I really am. So if you're a high B listening to this, you're like, well, that's not me. I mean, just take a moment. You might be listening to this in isolation. It's okay. Let's just sit with this for a second. I happen to be a card-carrying high B, so I can speak to this to a degree. When high Bs get into an environment, the natural turn on, again, this is what PI is measuring, the need and drive that kicks on is, I need to win like from all of these people in this room or this person that I'm sitting across. And again, this doesn't necessarily happen consciously. It can happen subconsciously, but I want to influence feelings. So the first step in doing that is trying to engage people at that level. So if I'm winning, if I'm starting from the engage others, I'm not starting from self-awareness or even self-management. I'm starting for, what is this person like? What do they not like? How can I read them? What do they need? How do I come across and win favor from this person? So then I can move down a path of influencing conversation or something like that. So some coaching for a high B would be, if I want to achieve vulnerability, all right, when I'm coming into those environments, I might ask a question. I might listen first. I might come back a little bit away from that. Come back from that need or overtly trying to be over the top driving the conversation. I might ask a question and again, listen. And you're thinking like, well, didn't he just say that for the A drive? The A drive and the B drive are both proactive drives. I want to do things to the environment that I'm in. I want to act on it. So yes, there is a degree of connection between the A drive and B drive, but if I'm a high B and I want to be vulnerable, sometimes vulnerability is, again, going to the low B side. It is stopping and listening instead of talking. It is thinking about hearing someone, letting them talk, and then if they pause, wait a couple beats, and then let that person maybe continue talking. Maybe try mechanisms. There's a few books I read of repeating the last 2 or 3 lines that someone said and just look at them. And it sounds silly, but if you, this is from a book by Chris Voss called Never Split the Difference. He was a CIA hostage negotiator, and it was a mechanism that he used and coached others to use to continue the conversation. So if I'm a high B, that might be tools or tools in my tool set that I need to just shut up, to stop trying to project myself and images and where I want things to go and vision on a relationship and let me receive from someone else. All right. In that, could that conversation take you in a place that you don't want to go? Could it take you in a place where you're going to appear, and again, this is appearance, I'm going to appear like I don't know anything, or I might appear like I'm ignorant. For a high B, that doesn't feel good. My ego is going to avoid that, and I want to take you to places that I shine. But once again, what are we using this presentation to talk about? It's going into that cave where someone might see you and not like you. Someone in interaction, when you're being most honest about who you really are, might reject you. They might not agree with you. They might not want to socially include you in whatever. It could be, if you're in sales, a deal. In management, it could be a meeting. It could be a team environment. There's a lot of risk. I'm not saying there's not real risk in this, but if the goal is to manage that ego and shrink that specter that something terribly bad is going to happen to you if you enter that vulnerability, that's where you're going to be able to learn these skills that I don't need to talk myself through this whole situation. Maybe I need to listen and observe. Maybe I need to give people space to insert what they want to insert, even if I don't agree with it, or even if it doesn't line with the image that I'm casting. Once again, is this going to cost you energy? Yes. The C drive, we have 2 more drives. This is a drive for patience, and where self-confidence comes from is 2 places, both process and family. So doing things in a sequential order, finishing things, and then family or relationship building. It is a social drive about tenure-based relationships. And if you dive down to needs in the bottom right, what that needs, if you think about any strong, durable relationship, is time, capital T-I-M-E. Time with people, time with a process, time to build relationships, kind of that extended family. You have like work family, or if you have like a sports team family, something like that. And then in those environments, like most relationships, a lot of relationships, at some point they need periods of stability to set in the pillars of that relationship. So when things get bumpy down the road, we can rely on that person. That is where high C drive individuals are focused. That's where they get their needs met. So if you think about vulnerability for a high C, it's like, wow, it seems like a good position to be vulnerable. But once again, if you think about the high drive, I want time, process, and family. So let's start with family on this one. So if I'm a high C and I get most of my relationship value for people I spend the most time with, guess who I'm maybe not listening to or including? People that are newer in my environment, or people that want to change the process that my family or my work family operate in. All of a sudden, I can get pretty, I can become a roadblock, or I can stop things from progressing because I don't want to accept the fact that something might change. So vulnerability, how it might come up for a high C when I go in that cave is, there is nothing stable. This world is changing. And if you're watching this recently with, be it a pandemic, be it cultural upheaval, be it the way that work environments operate, be it companies getting bought by other companies, what job should I prepare for? Now, if there was any allure to, hey, there's some stability going on right now, a lot of that's been shattered. That's a scary time for a high C because I know and I'm good at what I do because I've spent the time to do it. So what might be in that cave that you go into that's scary is you're going to need to change. Your current process isn't going to work. By the way, your current work family, these people you're looking around, there's going to be a new cast of characters. And you might have to change that. You might have to change careers. Those are the kind of things that can shake a high C to the core because I value that stability. Now, could some of those things be very disruptive? Yes. The question for the high C is, how much am I going to let that wishing back or looking back on these changes prevent me from moving forward? Or how quick am I going to go to finding the new process, requesting the time from the people that at my new company or on my team or within my family to rebuild and start to build the scaffolding of relationships for me to regain stability. So you can avoid it. Again, the ego wants you to avoid it and say, everything's going to be fine. This will pass. You don't need to change, which there's some value toward waiting. Be still, wait, let things go. But there's also a practical end to that runway. And it's the art of finding that as a high C of when do I need to turn the page? Not talk about what we used to do or how I wish it was or when I worked with so-and-so and start moving into this new environment. That's where vulnerability is going to lie. And again, on the low end, you have people that, if you want to take from their playbook on the lower C side, where I don't want process at all. I want change and I want to instigate change and I want to see more variety. You might find those people in that family network to have these conversations with about, how do I shift gears? How do I change how this all works in my mind? How would you do it? Not to, again, give up who you are and be like someone else, but to start accumulating the skills or some tactics that you might be able to install as part of your process. Finally, the D drive. This is the fourth A, B, C, and D, so artfully known. And this is about formality. So self-confidence here comes from correctness, or show me what right is, or the right way. That's where I get my self-confidence. The higher my D drive goes, think about it this way, the higher I go up on that scale that you see, the more information I need to make a decision and the less risk I want to assume in decision making. All right? So how do I get those needs met? Number one is clear expectations. The second is performance feedback. Those are connected performance feedback. And then fairness. Tell me what the rules are and I'll follow them and let's just make sure everyone else does too. So vulnerability for high D is actually pretty easy to spot. If you're speaking to this and you have a highest D, it's the furthest to the right on your PI pattern. I'm not probably, breaking any awareness for you that being wrong, making a mistake, and looking stupid are in your cave. All right? Being invalid and looking like you don't know what's going on, that you're not an expert in the thing that you're bringing to the table, or that you're in an environment where someone knows more than you. All right? And that's been blatant, particularly in one where you've been positioned to know more than them. It doesn't feel good. And the ego of a high D is that little voice in your head screaming how inadequate your work is. Don't look stupid. You better triple check that. Triple check it again. And by the way, you better cover your rear end. And if you did make any mistakes, make sure you make sure that there's someone else's fault. In an email you got or information that was incomplete, make sure you cover your back so that if it does go bad, it sure as heck doesn't fall on your shoulders. It's someone else's fault. Then we're safe. Then we're still right. So when I say it like that, even if you're a high D listening to this, hopefully what lands on you is that is not going to lead to optimal relationships for me. That is my ego dictating how I respond to other people in my environment, and it puts me in a very defensive mode essentially always. I'm on guard for people that might make me look like I'm doing it wrong, that the book I'm operating from, the book of rules, is inaccurate or not satisfactory. So when I go into that cave, what I see is new systems that I don't understand. When I go into that cave, it's me asking dumb questions and being minimized and feeling that embarrassment and that smallness when I have to raise my hand and ask the question that I feel in my mind. My ego says, you're supposed to know that. How do you not know that? I can't believe you're asking that question in all this group of people. You're going to look so stupid. No one's going to respect you. Whereas the behavior I want to go to and think about, if that's a mindset that lands on you, is the lower D behavior, which is, I don't mind asking the dumb question because I don't care if I come across dumb. As a matter of fact, once you tell me the way to do things, if I'm low D or if I'm the lower end of this, I almost don't even want to do them that way because I don't even want to do anything that you tell me to do. I actually have to work to follow the rules. I happen to be a card-carrying low D, by the way, so it's easy for me to speak on that side. So if I'm high D, how do I build those muscles to go out and ask those questions? And it's the same thing when I'm coaching, whether it's fitness, nutrition, or whether it's psychology, it's behavior, it's the same thing. It's incrementalism. I need to go and find experiences that I can tolerate, that won't break me, to wade into the ocean of my ignorance, to ask a question where there's a little bit lower stakes, but I start working on when that emotions come, when the ego comes in and says, you're going to screw up, you're going to make a mistake, you're going to look stupid, don't ask this question, stop. I push through it and I raise my hand and I realize the world didn't end. Honestly, when I start asking questions, maybe people respect me more when those things happen, that opportunity might come up that I otherwise wouldn't have done. And also in times of change, looking at new systems, new rule books, new approaches that are maybe even starkly different than the way you've done it, and not perceiving it that you are personally as a person invalid, that you are 100% wrong. But things evolve. Things change. New information comes to light that makes a different approach. If you're in a medical, for an example, or healthcare, you should hope that there's a different medicine, that there's a different protocol, that there's a new form of surgery that continues to level up the game of a surgeon or someone in nutrition. Even the same rules apply. So as we leave this, what I want to leave you with is this. When it comes to PI, that was one data dive that we just did. And if you had yours in front of you, I hope it was valuable, is you can only hope to change what you can understand. And can we fully understand ourselves and all of our wiring? We're making a lot of progress, but there's probably a lot more out there that we don't know than we do. But self-awareness is essentially this exercise. Understanding what's there without judgment, without looking at, oh, that needs to be different for me. It's needs and drives. It's your natural things that naturally move you, whether you're naturally patient or not, whether you're naturally dominant and extroverted or not, whether you're naturally focused on execution, doing things right, or you're more loose. Put that to the side and just kind of wrap your head around what's there and why it works on you. But as it relates to ego, let's go back to that theme, ego management. This person's an egomaniac. Their ego is the big problem. We all have ego. We're essentially on a spectrum of having ego issues. So the question becomes this. So what? We've been successful. I've been successful. I mean, I have a good marriage. I mean, my job's pretty good. We seem to be doing just fine without it. I maybe would take issue with that a little bit, saying we're optimal. One of my favorite authors is Anthony DeMello, and I think this quote really levels it. The ego lives in labels. Well, what are your labels? I mean, in historical, it's your role in life. So you can go mother, father, sister, brother. You can go the familial role. That is a label. Another label can be your job title. In America, if you're listening to this in the United States context, one of the first things we tend to run to is, oh, so what do you do? Oh, I'm a this, I'm a that, I'm a senior vice president, or, I'm an electrician. Or we as human beings just can't wait to label ourselves. And some of us can't stand labels. That's also a label, ironically. But we spend our life reacting to these. This is the kind of buckets that ego goes to live and gets nefarious, right? Careful, they don't let them call you that. Don't let them make you this. And then with those labels, what do? We tribe up in those labels. And now more than ever, with the global connectedness of the internet, social media, it is actually easier to make the world way smaller. And we get to wade right into those tribes that agree with us, that understand us. Vulnerability doesn't thrive in environments where everything is homogenous, where I'm knocking around and everyone's nodding their head saying, yeah, because every time we label, all right, think about this in the context of sports teams. Every time we label, like I'm a Cleveland Browns fan, right? All right, don't judge me, or judge me if you want to. All right, the minute I put that label up, there has to be a versus, because now there is a this. The reason I put that label, because there is a not that. And now we have found the enemy. And again, you're like, on the surface, well, it's sports, that's not in real life. Think about how us humans evolved, and do some homework. There's all kinds of books written on how we operate and how we tribe up. Groups can't wait to be galvanized around an enemy. And now let's take ego back in. Ego thrives when there is somebody to defend myself against, my cause, my initiative, a project at work, something. All right? So what I want you to stop and do right now is this quick exercise. And it's a 90-second exercise when I do this session live. You can pause and spend as much time as you want. If you want that time crunch, put a timer for a minute, 30 seconds, and go down when I say pause here in just a second. So I want you to think about what your labels are. All right, what are those buckets that my ego is going to use to kind of operate me, to try to make me react to other people and try to make me and separate me from other people? So I want you to list, and this is kind of a rapid fire, as many roles as you can. I gave you a few. Like for me, for instance, I'm a father, I'm a brother, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm an athlete, I'm a coach. Like just anyone you can, all the way down to maybe some of your Facebook groups or LinkedIn groups or your book club groups or whatever you have, as many as you can exhaust onto a paper. All right, and I put a few up there. So if you'd like to, hit pause here. That list stays up. 90 seconds to do this exercise. I'll take a couple breaths and we'll come back. All right, so if you pause that exercise and you restart, if you didn't, you can pause now, rewind, to do it again. All right, you probably have a list. Do you have more than 5? Do you have more than 10 labels written down if you look down? How about 20? I mean, I've had people have up to 30 plus labels on there. All right? And we can think about that saying, look at how expansive I am. All right? And look at all the things that I know and I'm involved in. Look how broad my thinking is. See, this ego thing isn't a problem for me. If I asked you the total number of labels you could maybe possibly come up with as possible labels available to you, how would your 30 stack up? Your 15 or your 10? Are you accumulating most of the pie chart of things, perspectives, cultures, people, perceptions, things, ideas, hobbies? I mean, if you're even representing a fraction of 1%, that'd be crazy of all the ones that are out there. So the key is now, and what I'm not trying to do is make you feel bad, right? What I want you to believe is this. Ego thrives in the label. It thrives in that. It loves it because there's so many verses. There's so many vectors of attack for you. When you step away from it and realize that you're more than that your life lives in, forget the buckets, like you exist above those things. Stop using those tools as judgment metrics to determine how bad you should feel today. Or what cause should I need to defend today because I have this label. I forgot I have to wear that pin on my shirt. It's getting above it. And again, I'm not saying don't take this as certain groups or that you're aligned with or right or wrong or invalid. I'm talking about getting above it. Because it's there where we can detach from the ego's narratives. We can start listening to other people. and even listening to other people in other groups or tribes, if you will, that don't agree with us, to build a bridge, to have a conversation. And think about it within the work context. Like, shrink the world to your company. Ego is one of the massive threats walking around all the floors of your building, or your Zoom calls now if you're still virtual. It's the positioning, the posturing, the fact that our needs are in combat right now. So are we being really authentic and vulnerable? Even if you're in company, some of the companies that I've worked with that use those words the most have the least amount of vulnerability opportunities, because there is a right way to talk and there's a wrong way to talk. There is a right thing to be and a wrong thing to be. It's essentially all the labels at work. And you can maybe think, if you work in a bank, an engineering company, in a healthcare organization, maybe in your mind, those things are popping up. Oh my gosh, that is true. That is true. You know, we are indoctrinated into this team. And there's value to that too. Well, we want to be an engaged culture. We want people to understand like what our vision, mission, values, and colors mean, that we're one team. There is value in that. But there are practical limits to that. And if you think about what we're talking about when I'm consulting with managers who are struggling with 2 employees, when I'm consulting with executive teams that are at ends with each other and don't know how to talk to each other as human beings, more often than not, there is an ego component to this that we address with PI and sometimes just facilitation over time. So if you're here and you're like, yeah, this sounds great, you've given us a few bits of insight, I've been listening to you. What if we can't manage it? What if the volcanoes are erupting everywhere inside of me and I can't get that awareness and I'm struggling to even start, or I'm a hothead, or I find myself just like isolated, or I've hit a glass ceiling at work. If I'm an engineer, or if I'm a specialist somewhere and I know I'm super smart, but people don't want to work with me. I know my work is superior, but people don't want to connect with me. I'm missing promotions because of maybe this lack of self-awareness, the fact that my ego is reigning and I just don't have the tools yet. So I'm going to give you a couple quick tools, all right, as we go through. These are a little rapid fire. And again, if you need to pause, I'm going to have this deck live for you to keep. You can go back to it. Number 1 is stop. When you're constantly in motion in the American context, or the North American context of work, if you stop, you're lazy. If you were stopped doing, it's something to merit guilt. However, if you don't stop, you will constantly be doing, not thinking. So stop, breathe, and just be. This is probably one of the most un-American things I could possibly say from a business context. All right, that just doesn't seem productive, BJ. Well, you show me an employee in America right now for the standard 8-hour workday that is productive for that 8-hour workday. Actually, show me somebody that's productive for 2.5 hours in that 8-hour workday, and I will show you a superstar of productivity. Like minutes, 2.5 hours of minutes accumulated of focused, dedicated work to the productive ends of your organization. All right? So maybe even right now, if you're stopping and breathing and you're realizing that's probably closer to the truth. So how long should I stop, breathe, and be? I'm not telling you to have your workforce stop for 6 hours. Let's just take 10 minutes. In that 10 minutes, just picture yourself overlooking a river. And this is kind of my exercise and meditation I've done for years. And I try to tweak it a little bit, but I just pause, I breathe. You know, sometimes we have to think about breathing. Lots of new books out on that if you want to find some reading material. And I just picture myself looking over a river. And why I look over a river is the river is my thoughts. The river is all my worries, anxieties, and all the things that are kind of coursing through my head. Because I'm one who has no patience and I want to do all the time. My body feels better when I'm doing stuff all the time. So I want to do stuff always. And when I'm not, I guilt myself. So what I do is I just watch all the crap in the river flow underneath. And I'm just sitting on there with my sneakers looking at it. And I just have to look at it. I'm like, oh, there's a a nice bird. And when it's really calm and my river's small in a gorge and it's nice and I'm actually get that peaceful experience. That's great. Most of the time, it's a dumpster fire. The river is on fire and it's rising, and there's a couch on fire, and there's people yelling at me from a table down there, and there's all this junk, and I just want to jump in and I want to fix it right now. But the exercise is an exercise of peace. It's an exercise of stopping, breathing, and teaching me to distance or detach myself. I can't help that stuff coming through my head. It's coming through my head, and maybe it's coming through your head. But what I can do is figure my position relative to those thoughts, ideas, feelings, emotions that are coming up. And I just observe them. And I've heard 10 up to 20, up to 30 minutes. If you can get an hour, congratulations. That'd be great. With this, I think more actually brings you more productivity later because you have a more general level of self-awareness of what's working on you. And sometimes you might find yourself in the river and you're there holding the couch that's on fire, that one thing. And in that exercise, the key is to let go of the couch and get back up on the bridge where you belong, just in that observer, all right? And if you want other tools, there's Calm app, there is Headspace. There's all these other guided apps to guide you through some layer of meditative practice or the practice of stopping and being guided through that process. And like anything else, when you start meditating, you start pausing, you have a breathing practice, your body won't like it because it's change, because you haven't done it before. It's like starting an exercise routine or a new diet that just seems miserable. Your body did the behavior before because it liked it. Even the stuff that seemed weird, it likes it, so it just does it more on autopilot. So I encourage you, if you try these things, make it a practice, i.e., I'm not going to be good at it. Maybe don't expect to be good at it or it to even be valuable for a longer period of time. Show up for 10 minutes a day, 7 days a week. Put it on a timer and just do it. Next, plan. So if I leave that state where I stopped, I breathed, and I was just present. I just sat and just looked at a wall and breathed. That's all I did. I didn't think anything else. Then I have to, at some point, I have to start working. So I have to plan to fit this stuff into my schedule. Maybe it's sit in my car when I go into the office. Or maybe if you have to work from home right now, you actually go into your car, drive somewhere and park it so that like you can make a pretend commute back to your house. But find a place to plan that in. And when you start moving into, all right, what am I going to do with my day? How do I manage my ego and manage that vulnerability in my day? I typically do a 3-column exercise. And the 3 columns are total, sum, and no control. And what is this? This is a writing exercise where you take 5 minutes and you start taking all that stuff that was in that river and start putting it where it belongs. Filling it. Is it something you have total control over, i.e., it doesn't matter what anyone else does, you'll be able to do something about that or move that forward today? Is it some control where it's a team meeting? There's some things in there that people could do where I have some influence over that thing happening or not happening or us defending for that? Or is it in no control where it's just something I call this the land of hopes and wishes. All right. I hope they sign that agreement. I hope this person comes to this meeting in a good disposition. I wish this would happen. All right. You need to write those down because you have to get them out of your head so that they can live somewhere so you can go work and be productive today. And then you fill them out. The challenge becomes this. How much is left for that person? Again, that's my PI pattern on the screen for me to actually aim myself at for the day. And then how do I need to self-manage to get those outcomes done if I own them all? If I effectively do this, and this is especially when I'm coaching people, when I effectively do this, excuses fall by the wayside. It's now no one else's fault, the environment's fault, my manager's fault, my teammates' fault, my kids. It's no one else's fault now if I don't accomplish that short list of things that live in the total control bucket on my agenda for the day. And another version of this that might help if that doesn't land, I often talk about CEO BJ, who runs BJ McKay LLC, My Day, and worker BJ. That's the hard hat BJ that's got to go do the things that CEO BJ has in my job description. In any given day, CEO BJ gets 15 minutes in the morning, and they're the best 15 minutes. I'm the brightest, I'm the clearest. Right after I'm done just kind of collecting myself, CEO BJ gets to plan the work for worker BJ. After that 15 minutes, beep, worker BJ comes in and then he works. He does the job that super brilliant, super smart, super strategic CEO BJ laid out for him that day. And on a really productive day, worker BJ doesn't stop again to invite CEO BJ back into the conversation because he got his list of work and CEO BJ did a good job. Worker BJ was tooled up for the day to be able to accomplish those things. So what's our goal in all of these exercises? It's this as it relates to your ego. And ego management on your team, with your peers, in your families, in your household. This is a human being thing. Separate real from perceived threats in your head. We aren't running to save our lives right now, okay, for the most part in the modern world where we're at. Most of the threats to our safety in our lives in general, our living the next day, to live and die, are perceived. We used to think of the saber-toothed tiger in the cave, and they're like, oh my gosh, we're still wired to respond to these threats. But most now, they're just perceived threats. Most of the saber-toothed tigers now is your house cat. All right? So why is our emotional and our ego response to those things so out of alignment with what actual threats are? So through these exercises, through using PI, what I've shared with you today, hopefully what comes up and what gets clear is what the real threats are. What are the threats to my virtue, my behavior, my productivity, the things I aim to be today, in the roles that I have proactively picked to live my lives through? For me, dad. For me, husband. For me, worker at Advisa. For me, I own a gym. Who do I need to be there? Athlete. I want to take care of myself. Proactively pick your roles, and all of the clarity will start to bubble up a lot faster for you. Now, here's not to say that you're not going to move backwards or have a bad day or fall off the wagon. The key is watch this again or do what you have to do. Get back to your practices to get you to that higher level version of yourself where you have ego in a place of awareness. You're not going to eliminate it as much as I've tried. And also, I caution you that if you address this, you'll be able to break down the value ranking battle. And think about this at work, and I deal with it in different roles, is people want to believe that their approach to everything is the right way, the valid way, and everyone else in that case is just wrong. We do this in relationships and in conversations even, this happens. When you have your ego under wraps and you have awareness of what's going on there, you can get above the value ranking battle and listen to people. You don't consider people lesser than you or greater than you. They're just people, right? And they have their own perspectives and culture and place that they came from. When we can contain the ego in these roles and do these exercises, we have a storage place during a workday or time that we can eliminate the ranking battle. And we can actually listen and validate the people that are with us. And so what are the outcomes if we do this? I mean, more presence in the environments we're in the relationships that we have at work, at home, with ourselves. We're able to actually listen without agendas to other people. Not selectively listening. Do I agree or do I disagree? Do I agree or just listening to people? And we're able to enter vulnerability. And by the way, vulnerability doesn't ever really feel good. So if you think, I'm super vulnerable, I love being vulnerable, I'd question if you're actually being vulnerable. Because vulnerable, that's where embarrassment lives. That's where idiocy lives. That's where the threats to your soft underbelly live that can actually hurt you. So if you're psyched to be vulnerable, I would question your definition of vulnerability. It feels so good to enter. It might feel good afterwards. There's a cathartic experience. That's why vulnerability is so valuable. But during, that's like saying, hey, this 100-mile race I'm about to do is going to be fun. No, it'll be fun to talk about afterwards. It might be an accomplishment, but goodness gracious, your body should be terrified of a 100-mile race. And that's how we should think about these things. So to wrap up, if you want one more activity for this, if you like this, I want you to take 3 minutes and pause. And I have one more note after this. I want you to think and write down 3 specific actions you intend to take from this session. And make sure, and again, if you want to actually see some of these practices come into place, you could take that stop, breathe, be. You could take the 10 minutes of silence. You could take the sum or the total sum or no control exercise. Any of those can be tangible actions, but try to make them SMART style, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. And make sure that they try to accumulate less than 10 to 5 minutes a day. When you're trying to take action on ego, your ego just didn't show up on Monday for a work day. It's always at work drumming up these stories behind the scenes. So when should I probably apply these actions I'm going to come up with? Every day. How much time do you have? If you're like most folks right now, the perception is not much, if any. So really minimize and think about accumulation over months and years of whatever action you put down. Instead of these huge chunks, I'm going to work on awareness an hour a day. And then you do it on Monday and you never do it again. It's like going to the gym for an hour a week and saying I exercise. You did, but what's the overall impact of it? So think about that. All right. And again, you can pause this for 3 minutes. If you need more time, that's fine. All right. To close, hopefully when you watch this, you can agree individually, speaking from person to person, It's time to evolve. If we want to impact and change the world, it starts here. It starts with people who have a general level of self-awareness, who can put their ego on wraps or at least be aware of it working on them, that can effectively self-manage, that can effectively listen to other people, especially those most different from me, my cultural context, my upbringing, all these different themes, my job, my role, my part of the company. You can fracture it however you want. We're bigger than our roles. We're bigger than the versus sign in between other companies, other sports teams, other whatever context you want to play it in. We're made of more, and I'm optimistic that we can do that in our homes, in our companies, in the world, in the social political environment. We're wired to do this, or else we couldn't even be having this conversation. But it doesn't start with other people doing things for us. It starts us taking ownership of those things that we can only take ownership by ourselves, which is self-awareness, self-management. And again, in that cave where ego hides inside of us, self-awareness is the work. Self-awareness is the pathway for us to enter in and figure out how we can continually, again, incrementally, not all at once, become more fit in that aspect so that we can ultimately do what? Change that world, change those relationships, change the cultures, environments that we're in for what we hope for is a universal better, not just our own. So thanks for listening today. If you like this, my deets up there for my LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram. I'm going to warn you, I'm not terribly active on any of them, and I don't really do direct messages. But if you look at my email up there, that's a great way to get connected with me. And if you're on a page viewing this and you've downloaded the deck and you're reviewing this, and if you want to have a broader conversation about your organization, I'm always open to those. Again, I'm doing these kind of honestly, it's a little selfish. I enjoy talking about these. These are the themes that I read about and I want to break down. And if you ever invited me into your relationships and your community and your place of work to have these conversations, it's always an honor. So hope you found this time valuable and open to hearing from whoever wants to reach out. And again, pass the word of this. Share it with other people. You're more than happy to do this. This isn't condensed to just my clients at Advisa. Share it with the world. Take care, everybody.